I brought actually some headsets. I wanted to just pass around so you can take a look at them. My use of the headsets started out with the Google, this is what they call the Google Cardboard headset. You pass that around. You need to use a smartphone with this. And this headset, you put your smartphone in here. And this headset cost maybe $12. It cost me about $12. But it's relatively inexpensive to use. But again, you need that smartphone to use that. And then beyond that, I got into the Gear VR. So the Gear VR, again, this it's an upgrade from the cardboard. But again, you would need to use your smartphone for this headset. So if you want to take a look at this one. Now I was excited about this. I don't know if anyone's heard of Oculus. Everybody heard of Oculus? Right. So Facebook purchased Oculus. Was it 2014? Was it 2014? From Palmer Luckett, making him the youngest billionaire in history. But the big thing with this headset, this is what they call the Oculus Go. So the Oculus Go, it came out in May. I want to say the beginning, first week of May. Got the email, ordered this headset. What's special about this is that it's a standalone headset. Well, they say standalone. And it's about $199. I got the lower end version. It's $199. But it's standalone, meaning you don't have to have your smartphone or insert it into the device, to the headset. However, you do need a smartphone because you have to tether your smartphone. It tethers with your smartphone, so you need the internet, but you also have to run the Oculus app. So you do need some type of device with it. But the great thing about it is you don't have to put your smartphone in the device. But you do need a smartphone. So a lot of my experience is not with the Vive headset, which is tied to a computer. The other thing, has anybody seen one of these before? What is this? Yes, this is a 360 camera. You use this to make virtual reality videos. So you use this. And then this camera is costs about $250. So it's a Gear 360 camera. So you can take a look at it. So I use that primarily to make videos. So if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. Now, you're probably wondering who Mr. Showalter is. Well, he's the reason why I got interested in all of this virtual reality. And he has nothing to do with it. So what happened, I was at a conference last year, San Diego. It was actually an accounting, American Accounting Association conference. He actually put together a video game. So it's a video game where students in his classes, his auditing classes, they play this video game where they move around in the video game and they're auditing inventory. I thought it was the coolest thing. So I said, this is great. But it inspired me, it had me thinking what would be also awesome is if the students they could actually be somewhere and actually look at the inventory. So I thought that would be really cool, right? So we learn a lot. So he sparked me into starting to look into virtual reality. So that's how I got into this. So I started doing my homework, started Googling things, going on the internet, buying stuff. So I bought my that Gear 360 camera, started making videos. Had a chance to talk to my mentor, and I was telling her, listen, this is great. And she's like, listen, you're a professor. Why don't you call up businesses and start talking to them and ask them, if you can go and video in their manufacturing plants, look at some of the a video. So I did that. Do you think I was able to go into these manufacturing plants with a camera? No. I mean, I got through to maybe, I talked to someone in HR department, they were like, you want to come to our factory and videotape our, I'll have someone get back. No one got back to me. So, I had another conversation with my mentor. She suggested, why don't you reach out to these CEOs of local VR companies? That was the best thing I ever did. So I reached out to different people. Actually, really came in contact with 3 CEOs, and I tell you, having a conversation, one guy, we talked for about 2 hours. And he really explained to me how this works. Now, to break down virtual reality, there's something called immersive and non-immersive experiences. Does anybody have an idea what an immersive experience would be? Anybody else?
Immersive is when you're using your senses, but so visually, that's all you're seeing is whatever that reality is. That's your reality. Where non-immersive is more like with a laptop and maybe like a 3D or 2D.
Exactly. Where you're actually, where you feel like you're in the actual environment. Now, there's 2 types of environment. There's what they call CG, which is this computer-generated environment. It's computer, so someone programs this environment out. Then there's an actual real environment where you use that 360 camera, and you actually film reality. So you're not creating reality, you actually film reality. So the great thing was I got a chance to talk to CEO, and one of the CEOs, he owns a company, and they make this CG, computer-generated environment, which was great. So I was like, wow. And he was telling me, he's like, hey, Mfon, your university would love this. You've got some great ideas on accounting. We could build out a virtual environment for you. How much do you think that would cost? Not build, but it was about $40,000 to just make a room, right? So I was like, well, okay. But the thing of it is, with that room, so I'm trying to give a little background. With that computer-generated room, you have to think, they have to program it. One, it's programmed to interact with one person. So that's the 40,000, right? But if you're going to have 2 people in there, they have to program and test it for 2 people interacting, and they have to have it so that, okay, if I'm in the room and I'm touching something and someone else moves something, they have to program for that. So it has to scale, and there's more and more cost to that. So do you think I went to my department chair with that 40,000? No. So I kind of maneuvered from that route of the CG and moved more into the live, more of a non-immersive experience using the 360 videos. So I went that route. But some other great information I received from this CEO was about VR sickness. So he taught me about things I should do, what I shouldn't do. Has anybody heard of the, I'm seeing some heads now. Has anybody heard of this VR sickness?
No.
What is it?
Well, just how fast you move the camera, especially if you're doing video, or is the camera, up high in the air and drop the camera? Because when you're in there, that's what you see. So all of a sudden the floor drops out.
Right.
Essentially, there's other factors.
That's true. So it's kind of like a motion sickness. So the first videos that I made, I'm walking around actually in Target with the camera, walking all around, talking about here's inventory, touching stuff. So they pointed out that if you're looking at this in a headset, so if it's immersive, that person, they can move, but they're moving with you. So there's a certain population that may have some type of motion sickness. So they call this virtual sickness. So I learned a lot from that. So what I moved into was actually using the videos stationary, and more so having me doing lectures. So it took me back to social media, which is one of my big friends. So it took me back to social media, posting the videos on YouTube. Why? Well, you have to think, many of my classes are about 30 students. So I didn't want to put the constraint on them as far as having a headset, having to use their smartphone to use this. The flip side is, okay, I have the headset, but do you think it's practical to have 30 students taking turns looking at the, not really. Actually, I have a question. How do you use your headset for the nursing course?
Well, actually, we just got a grant, I heard yesterday, for 5 Oculuses to do empathy training. So we are just starting to look now at using it, but we'll probably use it in some sort of a simulation setting, so that they'll be in a lab. We'll probably have some sort of alternative, like they'll have to rotate these in. It'll be limited because that sickness usually occurs when you cross over about 5 to 7 minutes. There's a number there. So everybody will have a turn, but it will be not for a very long length of time. And I think, I don't know if they're wearing this kind of a little bit off, but in near Rosemont, there's a big virtual reality place, and they limit you to 3 times for 7 minutes each because of the fact that their studies have shown there's so much sickness where they can go over that. So I think we're using a lot of that kind of stuff that's coming out.
Right, that's true. And there's, sorry, did you have your, okay. Oh, sorry. That's true, and the other thing with these, especially with the Oculus, there's not a lot of data on how long it's safe, or if it's not safe to use it. Why do I say that? So with these headsets, especially with the Oculus, you can watch Netflix. So they have Netflix, Hulu, so you can actually put this thing on and you can be in there for hours upon hours at a time. So there's not that data to say, well, this might be unhealthy or not, but yeah, I guess I agree. And it's very big in gaming.
Right.
Huge in gaming, small in as far as education, but I think it's growing as the technology continues to scale. So really this is a journey. So if you remember, the idea was to really have this whole virtual environment, and it kind of maneuvered me in another course, which I think is great. So it's back to social media, and I put this up here. So when we think about millennials spend 18 hours a day consuming media. When I first heard this, I'm like, how is this possible? It's 24 hours in a day. How are they consuming media 18 hours a day? Well, has anybody heard of multitasking? Everybody's laughing. Well, that's from being on Facebook. You can have Netflix. You can search, so you can do 2 or 3 things all at once. So that's how you get that 18 hours a day. You said what?
So when they sleep.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm like, wow, but I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. Watching TV, tweeting, checking Facebook, Instagram. So moving back into media and actually creating the content, and then really posting it on YouTube. So that's my big thing. Having the virtual videos on YouTube. Now, when I was talking to these CEOs and those who are in the commercial side of this business, you hear a lot of this immersive. It's more immersive than traditional learning, and it's more interactive, which I can agree. And then the last thing that I would hear constantly is this retention. So I had a conversation with a gentleman from one company who every other word that he was saying to me is retention. The students that they'll remember. I said, do you have any data? So he actually sent me some research that was done in a school in China. And they were using the HTC Vive headset. So this is This is a headset that's connected, it's connected to a computer. So they have 3 of these, and this is for a physics class. So what they did, they had the students half of the class were looking at a traditional, what we call a traditional lecture, someone on PowerPoint giving a lecture. They took an assessment. And then another part of the class, another 10 students, they actually had a VR, so a virtual reality-based lesson on the same thing. So they had students to take the test immediately after this, after the teaching, and then the test 2 weeks later after the testing. So it was interesting. It was interesting. So the VR was significantly higher. Okay. And then the same thing with the delayed score. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Now here's the thing. So I kind of question this in the sense, okay, this is physics, that's great. They're using an HTC Vive, right, which is one type of headset. Would this actually be different if they were using a different medium, a different headset? If they were using, let's say, for example, instead of computer generated, would that be the same if they're using, a live video? So it kind of had some questions for me, but I would say, from my experience, it's more immersive from what I've read. But would that translate to what I'm doing or into other medium? That kind of question, didn't know. Wasn't too sure about that. One thing to say is virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. It is the future. So there's more and more of this. We see more and more of it. And I think many times a lot of the students and a lot of us, we may not actually know that we're looking at virtual reality. So I tell the students, if you're going to look for a car, most times if you go online, you see a 360 video. You can go inside the car. You're looking for an apartment or buying a house, they'll give a virtual tour. So you'll see more and more of this technology in use as it's able to scale. Some of the other uses outside of my subject matter, so for example, history, are what they call virtual field trips. So you can use software where students can either travel through time to historical events, or they can do virtual tours of museums. So they can go to a museum and do a museum tour, or to other places, so they can have some sort of experience. Now, I hope this is okay. It's lovely. So I wanted to show you how I use this. So this is a video that I put together on the balance sheet. All right, everyone, let's learn some accounting. Sorry. So we're going to talk about the balance sheet. Oh, sorry. Now, if you turn around and look, you'll see me balancing on one foot. Please don't laugh at me. That's not what the balance sheet is about. So the balance sheet is one of the 3. This is what I've been using the videos for. So this is recorded with that camera. The balance sheet is also known as the statement of financial position. So you see me, you can move around, you can look. So we're going to talk about what makes up the balance sheet. So when we think about the balance sheet, I want us to remember. So if you remember, the balance sheet does not the journey started with this whole computer-generated environment, and then it kind of moved to this, which is it's great. I use it, but the majority of the time now that I use this is mainly in my online courses. So the online students, they really love this because it's not this, now if they have the headset, so if they have the Oculus, if they have the Vive or the cardboard, they can actually, it's like they're just in the classroom with me. But if they want to look at it on, like you were mentioning, on the computer, on their cell phone, they can move around. So, or they can hold up their phone, and it's like they're actually, you know, can play with it more. You know, so it adds an extra level of interaction and engagement in the online environment. So that's what I found. Also, it's easier, as you know, with YouTube, you can have closed captioning, and so there's other things that can be added to it. It's easily accessible for the students. So we got another one. Any questions with this video? Yes.
So with the online classes, is that a synchronous class you're talking about? So you have the 3D camera set up while you're teaching, and they can see what you're doing in real time?
That's a good idea. No.
Okay.
No, I have. It's possible to live broadcast, but that would be outside. I would have to connect that, as far as I know, to YouTube or to Facebook, and then broadcast it live. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks for talking that. So these are locationally static 360 videos, right? Have you ever tried stitching a couple of them together so the students have?
I have. So I started building them out. But this goes back to that whole, the VR, this VR sickness.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was doing, one CEO, I would send video. I made tons of video of me running around and moving the camera. And the feedback that I received from him was, don't move around. Stay still, you know, keep the camera still. You move around. And that helped because, so my thought process, that was a good question, in making the videos, I make it from the mindset of building it, okay, how will the student engage with it from, let's say, a desktop or from their cell phone? And then I think after that, how will the experience be in the headset? Versus going from the headset experience to the less immersive experience. If that makes sense. That was a good question. Yes, sir.
I'm not quite sure the value of this, in the sense that, like, how do I know when to go 360? And if I were gonna, like, why would I turn around and look at you talking if this stuff's on the board? And if then why wouldn't you be in front of the board and in front of the text? So how do you know when to, how would they know when to go 360 and come back and all this kind of stuff?
Exactly. That's the reason why, so feedback from the students, initially, many of the students, I would be standing here talking, they wouldn't know that this is a 360 video. So what's happening, and what he was talking about as far as stitching, what happens now, I'll be somewhere else and I'll let them know that I'm somewhere else. And you need to move around with the video.
But there's gotta be a good reason to move around, not just because you're somewhere else.
Oh, you mean as far as the text or the content? I have them to move around because just to play with it, to engage with it. So
Okay.
That I see what you're saying. And another idea that I received was that you can also add, so there's other editing where you can add 3D images.
Well, if they do one, then they know it's 360, then they know the other ones are 360 and, you know, going forward.
Some do, some don't. Feedback I received, because you have to think about it, the students are accessing this through YouTube. And for, I would say, 50% of the students, this might be the first time that they're actually looking at a video in their class like this, in this format.
I had a question in terms of setting up with this.
Yes.
So where's the camera, and after you record it, what software do you do editing, and then on YouTube, is that where they know it's, you do the 360, or how does it, how are you moving it?
That's a good
How does
question.
the student move it?
That's a good question. That's
So
a
more
good
logistics. Yeah. This is really exciting.
That's a great question. So the camera is actually sitting, I've got well, just to show you. around, there's a tripod, so I've got a portable tripod that I use. The camera, it mounts on top of the tripod, and you can sit it down. So the camera's there. Let's see if we can, oh, sorry.
So do you put it at the corner? You think that's the best lighting and?
The camera, usually I'm moving around in the center of the
We hear a
camera.
lot about
So if you look-
earnings
If
season.
you look here,
What
you
is
see that little,
earnings?
those little legs,
Well, earnings,
that's where the camera.
Primarily, we hear it, and it refers to after-tax.
Got heavy fingers. So I'll have the camera, so really, okay, let's back it up. When I first started doing this, and it was a lot of work initially for me. Why? Because it's different than if you're videoing with a cell phone or a video camera. Because you're always you're gonna always be there somewhere. You can't hide. It's 360. So, and then you have to, the camera itself, it doesn't, there's not on that camera that I have, there's not a focus. So you have to think about, okay, I think what you were mentioning, okay, we've got this stuff on the board, I've got to station the camera so that you can read the stuff that's on the board as well. Then decide where I'm going to be in the shot. So to answer your question, I usually have it in the center. The first thing I do is to figure out, okay, if I'm on the blackboard, I focus it to get that in focus, the material that's on the blackboard. I move around. There's editing software. It's pretty easy to use.
Does it come with the camera?
It comes with the camera,
Okay.
so you're able to edit it. Initially, to do one of these videos took me probably, I want to say about 3 hours to do. So I've gotten that down to about, without the setup and time, probably a good 30 minutes.
This is like very like iMovie, that's simplistic, the editing?
I haven't used iMovie.
Oh, okay.
I use Premiere. It's a lot simpler than if you use Premiere. It's way simpler than that. What I've done, so a tip. So before, I would record directly to my device, the camera, or save it on my phone's memory. And what I've started doing, which cut a lot of time, I broadcast live. So there's a feature on the Gear app. You can broadcast live to YouTube or Facebook. So what I do a live broadcast directly to YouTube. So then it's there, it uploads, then it saves. Then after it finishes uploading, I'm able to download it as an MP4. Then put it in the editing software.
Oh, that's probably easier, yeah. And or just the file, and you can make the broadcast private, so.
Yes, exactly. And then what I do, to go back to and I'll get to that, but to go back to the point you were making as far as the different scenes, that I started doing it, and it's challenging because, so what I've been doing, I'll have, let's say, the earnings is on the board, then I'll erase that and put something else, and then kind of break it up. So I'll do maybe 3 or 4 broadcasts for that. The challenge is, what I would like to do moving forward is change the whole environment. Because in the end, the only thing that's really changing is what's on the board. You know, so this gentleman is not coming back.
So I think this stuff is super cool and it's got a great potential. But my question is, so you're writing stuff on the board and you're talking about stuff that's on the board, like the earnings up there. I don't quite get the value of having the 3D camera as opposed to just a normal camera shooting at the board. So my question is, what are you doing in addition, like in the back, to add that value to students saying, oh yeah, this is much better than just a normal camera?
So it's that extra level, that was a good question. It's an extra level of immersion, so, and engagement, as far as the students are able to move around with it. I have no data on it, except for the data that we've seen as far as retention. And I have feedback that says students, they like this, it's a little more interesting. than, let's say, a YouTube video that I may post. But as far as what I'm doing, I can't, I think that was the thing we mentioned, that's the challenge with this, I can't escape. So if I'm recording this, I'm always gonna be in the, you're gonna be somewhere, it's kind of like, where's Waldo? I'll be there somewhere in the shot.
I don't know if this will address your comment, but one of the things that we do at our university, this is in foreign languages, is we went into cognitive science and specifically research on the spatial learning and how human cognition is wired for remembering things in space rather than statically or visually even, and try to capitalize on it in terms of vocabulary acquisition. So we would have these virtual mental palaces that we would have our students build with Minecraft, and then use that virtually and have them manipulate the landscape and move through it. And we don't have any numbers on it yet, but we're seeing that they do like it, they're motivated in terms of using it. We'll have to wait a little bit to see how effective it is. So that would be a part of the answer for how this would be innately or inherently more immersive or more effective rather than just directing camera at a board.
I think I look at it as a souped up YouTube video. that's how I look at it because if you remember, the journey started with the idea of having this fully immersive experience where the students are in this totally virtual environment, and then I've wound up here, which is a little off, but it's great, where instead of using it in the classroom, which initially that was my goal, is to use it in county classroom, it works and the feedback is better for the online classroom. That makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of this has to do with when you're writing simulations, you're creating simulations, it has to do with authenticity, which goes back to this idea of space. And it's not always about simulating everything with the highest level of accuracy and reproducing it. Mm-hmm. So you're really boiling it down, where I think if a student, if you were recording your live session, the student going back to it has a sense of where you were and where it was, and so they're recalling your teaching in that space. And I think about like lecture capture where there's slide and video and the user can choose what is the preference. So I think part of it is, students may watch and you may be talking and you may be talking about something and they know that the board is still there. So the same way we're in here, if this were a classroom with whiteboards all over the walls, you could be sort of following, you could say, as they said on that wall. So I think it's getting a sense of what it is you're capturing or reproducing. Because I was looking, that example that you gave about the physics course was a celestial physics course. So my guess is a more comparable comparison would be going outside at night and looking at the night sky or going to a planetarium. Right. And so part of it is thinking very concretely about what it is you're trying to reproduce the experience of and how that's created.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I just have a logistical question. How long do you make these? So like what's your average for the length of the video itself?
I have a 4-minute rule.
Okay, 4 minutes is what you use?
4-minute rule. So I've read students that, they don't watch videos very long, the attention span isn't very long. I also talk to my students and I ask them, because I would push it, normally I would have videos, not these videos, but YouTube videos, maybe 10 minutes, and they were like, that's too long, so then I started cutting. And what I found is, when I try to do the shorter videos, I might do let's say for example, this video is 1 minute and 40 seconds, and I feel like I've been talking for 10 minutes. And I look, I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is only, 1 minute and 40, so, but yeah, so normally it's not very long, about 2 minutes. And again, really, like I said, on this whole journey, everything for me is flipped. So my perspective is not from the immersive experience. So like that goes back to that research we were looking at, that's a fully immersive experience, right? So that's why I was saying that data, the question is, does that apply to something like this? That, I wouldn't know. Does that make sense? The other thing, I take it from the side of the non-immersive, and then kind of go to the perspective of the immersive. That, okay, that's great if a student does want to look at one of these videos. Or if someone has an, so if you know with these, the HTC Vive or the cardboard or the Oculus, you can go to YouTube. So you can sit in there all day, you can go to YouTube. I have these videos on Facebook. You can go and pull them up. You can search accounting, the video will come up and you can watch it. So that option is there. So there's that bandwidth.
Can I just say this,
Yes.
and I'm not plugging this company because I have nothing to do with it, but there is a company called Max VR, which is in Schiller Park, Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
and you actually, it is a full immersive experience. It's a game, and there's a lot of, it's shooting, so the schools don't sanction it, but it would be, it's a big issue right now. But there was a group of us that wanted to go to there to see what it was like to do fully immersive, and it's a huge warehouse. And what they do is you are fully immersed, where you have to jump down like 50 stories, and people won't jump. They just stand there and they're like, I'm not jumping, I'm gonna die. And then they say, fine, turn to the left and hit the elevator button. So they actually do that. So if you're looking for like how to use it, that might be a really good way for people just to get a little experience as to, it is really cool in that environment, which would be nice if they would make it a hospital. Or they would make it something else, but there's more money in gaming than there is in education, so.
Right, at this time.
At this time.
At this time. So I do see it scaling, yes.
Just to follow up about the YouTube, so when it's on YouTube, is there a specific icon or CEO that, so, I mean, for people to search, like, these are 360 videos, is
Oh, you
the keywords, I'm thinking.
Up in the upper left corner, that little symbol, up in the upper left corner, that up, down, left, right arrow, that's a 360 view.
Right, but you can't, if you go on, I see what you're saying.
So
Do a
when
search,
YouTube-
just do a search for 360 videos, there's thousands
You
of them.
can pull up 360 videos on YouTube, yeah, and on Facebook.
So do you just type in 360 and, I'm just wondering, should you put it as a keyword, so
Yeah.
it comes as
I
tag?
do. Yeah, I do. I
Okay.
put in keywords, but you're right. If you do search 360 videos, it will pull up
Oh.
the 360 videos on YouTube. You can pull them up on Facebook as well. There's also another a social, as you want to call social networking site called VRTV.
Oh.
So and I post these there, but you can go on there, and it's mostly a lot of. I want to say they're videos, 360 videos of a lot of game type things. Kind of like I don't know if you're familiar with Twitch. Is anyone familiar with it? Well, if you're not familiar with Twitch, Twitch is a platform where you can actually watch people playing video games. And that's the fourth largest user of internet traffic, I think.
Oh.
It's Twitch, so it's pretty big industry of people watching people play video games. So if you go on there, you see a lot of video game characters in 360. But then, I post there, so you can see a lot of, it's all 360 videos that are on there as well.
And then just one more question, how much was the setup for your camera and
So my camera, probably, I'd say just under 300 bucks for the camera, yes.
and it comes with the software and everything?
Yeah, so it comes with the software. You can buy a memory card for the camera, but there's an app. So you can control everything through the app, the Gear 360 app on your phone. And then, like I said, what saved me a lot of time, I would just broadcast live to YouTube. And then I wouldn't have to use any memory or anything like that. And then I could download that MP4 to the site. And it comes with editing software.
Okay, and how about the speakers? Do you have an external speaker, like the Snowball, or do you use the video?
Microphone?
Microphone, that's what I meant.
No, I use the camera.
Oh, it's
The
pretty
camera
good
plays.
audio?
Sorry?
The audio's pretty clear, you think, or?
Well, like I was saying, you gotta kind of, you can't zoom, so you see how the camera's positioned. Really, the camera is probably, if this is the board, the camera's right here.
Yeah.
I'm not really too far away,
Mm,
so I'm not really too far away.
But if you had a lavalier like that, like getting you
Can you-
wireless, you
yeah.
can walk around, and yeah,
I haven't tried that.
okay. Sometimes the white noise of the room.
Oh, you mean like static? Or?
Yeah, that's why I try to make sure the microphone.
So typically these cameras don't have audio in, I mean, I'm sure some do,
Okay.
or whatever, and so people usually take an audio recorder on the side and then match it in
Oh.
Premiere.
Okay,
This one does. This one does.
okay.
This one does. It's pretty good for the cost.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. What brand is this one?
Samsung. Yes. Sir.
I really like what you're doing in your this is like your slide says how to use virtual reality. You're kind of on the cutting edge, and you're actually jumping in there trying to do the lecture in 360 video. We saw some of this in Second Life where people were trying to teach within Second Life, but this is kind of a new thing, and you're brave, and it's kind of a really good conversation because we're all asking, well, why and what if? Because you're kind of out there ahead of us, right? And so in that spirit of what ifs, I wonder. My wife's an accountant, so I associate spreadsheets with accounting and lots of good work in the world making things run. So one what if had you thought on about if you blow up, if you're running the computer screen at a high, blow it up really large, and then you got your whiteboard next to it. That might be of some value if you are getting into kind of doing the accounting work itself with spreadsheets. And then also, I just inspired by your thoughts here and what you're trying to do. Notice you're in a rectangle, and if it's a 360 video teaching environment, it ought to be a cyclorama. It ought to be round, right? And had you thought of also maybe interacting with students or TAs in the teaching environment? It is kind of a teaching environment. Anyway, I commend you for exploring this kind of stuff.
That is, thank you, I appreciate that. And to the data visualization, there is a company that, and I was able to demo the technology where you can actually, from your desktop or from the headset, you can view these graphs, those scatter plots, you can view that in conference in a virtual environment.
Yeah. But I'm wondering, because you're in that classroom setting for online students, what I'm suggesting is pull the screen down, blow up your spreadsheet or your slides really, really high, have your whiteboard next to it. And then students are able, and I think somebody in the room was talking about, in that environment, you have multiple things still on the wall that students could go back to. Like I'm slow and I'm forgetting, so I'm gonna go back and look at the slides, or I'm gonna come over here and look at what you wrote earlier. And you can almost just fill up the room with content that you're interacting with. So I think you're onto something, and I'm impressed with just back to the real world in 360 and its value, especially for a student at a distance or something.
Wow, thank you. That's great. Now I'm going to take that and use it. That's great. That is awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I think I want to be respectful. It's after 10 o'clock, so I want to be respectful, but I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you do have any questions, my contact. Sure. Thank you.
I'm Andy Young, I'm on the FSI committee. You can do these online if you want to. I don't know if it's easier. So if you want to do it online, you can do that. Or the same questions, or you can do them here. Whatever you prefer.
Here's my contact information. If you have any questions or
There's two or more.